All right. Well, that was a lot of information. Been a great day. We're gonna wrap things up here. And I'm stepping in at the last minute because I don't know what happened to Tim. Our last, this is Heather Reiss is well, I know her because my student is my student at APU. And we asked her to come and just sort of talk about how we define a lot of this information in a cultural context. And so Heather, come on up. Heather's worked in travel and tourism industry for 16 years and is currently pursuing her Master of Science in Outdoor Environmental Education at APU. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, end of the day, wrap up. Thank you for everyone for hanging in there to make it to this moment, to listen to me jabber at you. I do not have PowerPoint, so these beautiful people over here that have been doing all of this technical work all day, you get a break from doing that. So, Willie Jen, Unstadota. Hello, how is everybody doing? Heather Reiss, Suzette Delan, Kachetne Island, Shasta Lake, California, Kayachtits Insiaden, Nuta Istakari. So what I spoke to you was the Central Atna dialect. I said, my name is Heather Reiss. I am from the Iron Clan, which means I am not Indigenous Alaskan. I am originally from Shasta Lake, California, and I currently live in Nuta, Alaska, which is Palmer, Alaska. Over lunch, I had some conversations with some people about when we interpret or educate the people that come to our state about Indigenous people. When you are not yourself of Indigenous blood, sometimes you can question whether or not you should actually be educating any of that, whether it's your place to be educating that. So I wanted to start this by speaking the language that I am a student of. I am not Indigenous Alaskan, but I am a student of the Central Atna dialect because I do live and play and call Atna native lands my home. So my answer to anyone that says, should I be teaching this, is absolutely. You should be able to give information about the Indigenous people of Alaska, but you should be thinking about how to do it in a sensitive way, how to do it in a respectful way, and just go about being intentional and making sure that you're giving accurate information. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I got into doing this, so you have some context about who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So as Paul mentioned, I have been working in travel and tourism for about 17 years now, a little over 17 years. And it's mostly been in guiding in a variety of positions. I've gone from being that first-year guide who is furiously digging through field guides just so you can hopefully have half a shot at correctly answering the massive load of questions that you get from guests and clientele every day, to being in management, doing like the interview processes, hiring people, and then training people. I first came to Alaska about 12 years ago now. Yeah, we're just going on 12 years with my husband, and had previously worked with tribes in the lower 48, specifically the Numipu people. People often know them as the Nez Perce. And then I worked for Doyon Tourism out in Denali National Park at the end of the road at their Kantishna Roadhouse site. And in my years of work, I kind of started to notice there was definitely a hole in comfort level when it came to guides and their ability to be able to appropriately and sensitively talk about Indigenous people, especially if you're working for somebody like Doyon. Oftentimes visitors would come out there and I would talk to them and just out of interest ask them, why did you choose to come to our lodge and not one of the other ones? And they would say that it was because it was Indigenous owned, and their hope was to get some education, and they were a little disappointed because they didn't feel they were getting education really anywhere on their trip, even though they were seeing Indigenous influence throughout the state. As we all know, living here, you see a lot of artwork and other influences. It's kind of hard to come to Alaska and not see it. However, people generally just said they felt that they just were not getting that education. So I finally decided that the only way to do something about it was to simply do something about it. So I decided to pursue my master's to get the skills I needed to create a curriculum program geared specifically towards guides to help the travel and tourism industry do a better job of correctly and sensitively educating these people who come to our state so that they could leave with a better idea of who Indigenous Alaskans were. Now, in working on my project, I do everything working with a lot of different partners. I build relationships with people. I have a lot of mentors in different tribes throughout the state that I go to. I don't develop any curriculum without consulting them first, seeing what it is that they think should be in these curriculums and perhaps what they think should not be in these curriculums, because not every single story is ours to actually tell. And that's something to be mindful of. So that is a little bit on why I do what I do. And the conversation that we're going to have over the next few minutes is, how do we actually teach things in a sensitive way that is honoring those who have been on this land? So what I always tell people is you really need to think about really the nuances. You don't necessarily need to make a stand and say, I'm going to tell you a big old story about the people that are here on this land. It can just simply be in how you use your verbiage, the language that you use when you speak of people. And a really good way that you can start out talks with people is really comes down to land acknowledgements. Land acknowledgements have been a big topic in the discussions I've had with my own mentors and advisors, and everyone generally agrees that it's a really good segue to use into starting appropriate conversations with your people and possibly even kind of provoking different thought processes for them. Because one thing we have to remember is the people we work with, particularly adults, and if you've ever worked in education theory, what you'll find is adults are kind of notorious for being the worst students on the planet. Because we all come to the picture with a whole life full of experience and preconceived notions of what we think we know. So the people you're talking to have already heard stories about who they think that Native American people are, and oftentimes those will be incorrect assumptions. So our job is to kind of ease them into the correct assumptions. So just out of curiosity, who here has actually done a land acknowledgement in their work? Couple people. Okay. They are complicated. It's still kind of a sticky issue. Some people actually don't really agree with them. Like I said, in the advisors I speak to, we generally agree that it's a good way to segue into things. And what I always tell people is if you're going to use a land acknowledgement, really do your homework and then think about how you're saying it. Because one of the worries we always have about land acknowledgements is it performative? Is it just something you come up with that you generically say, you know, I'm happy to be on this land. We're working and playing on the land of the Otna people today, the traditional land stewards, moving on. Pretty inadequate. Doesn't really start a conversation. So your goal is to try to start that conversation and say it in an appropriate way. I was actually recently in a conference where this came up, and this was a new idea to me. We always hear the use of the term traditional, and someone pointed out that for some people, traditional might denote something in the past. And so if you're going to use traditional with it, you should add something making it clear that the Indigenous people on this land are not just traditional, but they're also living a traditional living culture. And that's the important key here is a lot of people tend to talk about Native Americans as if they're in the past, but they are living a current and living culture. So you want to think about that. In all the things you say, the verbs you use, am I talking about them in the past or am I placing them here in the present and making it clear that they are actively here and existing in their traditions in a modern day fashion, because they do have cell phones just like us. right? I mean, just people like us existing here like us. And so you want to think about that when you do that. And then again, think of it, how do I do an introductory statement in this way? So going on with thinking about how language is important, thinking about how accurate history. Are you sharing accurate history? Are you making sure that what you're sharing is what should be shared? As I mentioned, sometimes stories are not ours to tell. I know some of the stories that are told out there are a little on that border of some people are okay with them being told, some of them aren't. An example I can give is one that's actually for the Chugach for Glacier Bay. There's the story about the people fleeing Glacier Bay in the face of glacial advancement, and then the national park being created, and then the people being unable to come back. Has anyone heard of that story? Yeah, a couple people of you worked here. So it is commonly told. I know the Park Service tells it, different sites tell it. You can readily find it online. You can find it in writing. You can find it in YouTube videos. You can find it absolutely anywhere. But there are some elders that do believe that perhaps it's not a story that should be told by anyone other than somebody from the tribe, because it's a very sensitive story. So thinking about that, something we can do better on is simply asking consent when it comes to certain topics that we're going to talk about. It's as simple as trying to find somebody to reach out to and saying, hey, I want to do this. Is this something that I can actually do? For example, when it comes to resources, when my resources, because I don't have a PowerPoint, you won't see them here, but they will be listed on the website later along with everybody else's info. And there's a video on there that I highly encourage everybody to watch. It is from the Chicaloon. This is always a tongue twister for me. It's from the Chicaloon Tribal Council Cultural Archaeology. See, I always mess that up. So Chicaloon Tribal Council Cultural Archaeology. It's a new video. It was released in March. Again, I highly recommend you watch it. It talks about what they're doing on the land, the cultural archaeology, how they're reconnecting to their land, how things are important to them, what is important to them and why. And they do a really good job of explaining things. Now, I knew that that video was newer and not necessarily readily available to people. And I had seen it in another talk I saw, and they talked about how they were still talking in talks of whether or not they were going to openly release it, because it talks about this issue of the renaming of Lion's Head, driving up near Glacier View. And so I reached out to Angie Wade, who's of Chicaloon, and I asked her permission to share it. And I told her that, you know, I didn't want to share it without asking first. I need to know if it was ready for something to be shared, since I did find it online. And is it okay that I share it? Because again, I'm not Indigenous Alaskan, and I'm trying not to step on feet. And either way, it's fine. Tell me yes, tell me no. That works fine. And she wrote back and said, yes, you have my consent. So that video is one of the resources you will receive once everything gets posted, and it's a really great watch. And again, really, really new, not readily available. There's one place you can find it if you know exactly what to search on Google, but you'll get the link for it, so you don't have to do that. Also, what I want to touch on in how we do this is, I think one of the biggest things to remember is when you're answering questions about Native Alaskans, which you get, whether you're doing a specific natural history tour, it doesn't matter if you're doing a hiking tour, if you're doing a kayaking tour, if it's even a bird-based tour, it's common to have people ask you questions, right, that are totally outside of the subject matter. You're leading a natural history tour, but people come up with questions like, well, you know, how did this affect the Native Alaskans here? Who were they? Can you tell me more? Just remembering that you are sharing complicated history, and to be sensitive with that. And again, it's all about nuances, how you talk about things. For example, I've been asked before in my own work that I've done, people will say, well, tell me about the first people that came here. And a lot of times what they're actually asking me is, well, tell me about the first colonizers that came here. And there is a difference between people who have occupied this land for 20,000 plus years, time immemorial, and people who only came hundreds of years ago. And you can clarify that with people without being nasty about it and say, well, I can actually tell you about both. Which ones are you specifically asking about? Or shall I tell you a little bit about both of them? So you know about both the groups of people that have been here. Thinking about how we use terms commonly, like the last frontier. We always hear that in Alaska. I remember when I first came to Alaska, I heard that term everywhere. And that term actually kind of implies a land that needs to be conquered. It's the last frontier. It's the last place you're going to find wilderness and openness and open ground. But what we need to remember is everywhere we walk, everywhere we paddle, any place we recreate, sit, eat lunch, whatever we do where we live, it's all sacred land. It's all someplace where maybe a baby was born, maybe a family lost somebody, maybe somebody already sat on that beach, and likely they did, thousands of years ago, and they also ate their lunch and rested for the day, or sat atop that hill and ate a little snack while looking around for wildlife. People have already been here. So again, when you're talking to your people and you're talking about things like wilderness, think of it in these contexts of the fact that people have already existed here and they've continued to be here. So we can do our due diligence in order to do better and hopefully be a little bit more respectful and mindful of those that have existed here for thousands of years, and don't ever be afraid to ask. I think that's one thing I've noticed in my time is when I've talked to guides, when I'm training guides, and a lot of times they'll come in and say, oh, I really want to do a program that's talking about the native people and you know, talking about this specific aspect and this, and it's really fascinating. And so I'd kind of coach them on how to actually do that research. And then to they themselves perhaps just send an email to this particular person and ask their opinion. And then they kind of back off because I think they, again, have that feeling of, should I be doing that? Well, you'll never know if you don't ask. So don't be afraid to ask and make sure that you're doing the right thing and that you're treading lightly on a place that definitely requires it to be done with people that more than deserve our respect and our time and our care put into making sure that we're doing the right thing. And this can be used on any of the subjects we talked today. It's amazing the questions people come up with that are related to different subjects in the work I've done. So again, just think about those things, how to be sensitive, how to be thoughtful, how to be intentional, and think about the words you use and whether or not it's actually communicating all of those things. So I wanted to actually kind of shorten my talk today because I know it's been a long day. So I'm going to leave it at that, make it short and simple. You can always, I'm assuming my contact info will be listed on the website with my info. So if you want to contact me and ask any more questions, you're welcome to do so. Happy to hear from people. And I guess, does anyone have any quick questions before we call it a day?
That's another big question, you know.
It is.
Start with for the corporation of the area that you're working in, or
Yeah, that can totally depend on the area. And that's absolutely a really good question to ask. I know when I started, it was like, man, I mean, I have contacts up in Denali, but I'm currently living on Otna land. So who will I even talk to? In my case, the Chicaloon tribe was the closest. They're very open to answering questions and talking to people. So if you have a tribal council locally, you can send them a letter to ask them some questions. You definitely want to introduce yourself to people before just asking questions. But you know, I have also just like found people online that I thought maybe they can answer a question well, and it never hurts to send that email. And I have gotten replies from different people that work in like the cultural departments in corporations that can absolutely work. So yeah, it's just, again, it's that just being very intentional and saying, I'm just going to ask until I can find an answer, and maybe even know a friend you don't know who knows someone who will know who to ask. So just ask around, or just send those emails, get them out there and see if someone will reply. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, so the question was, what's an adequate land acknowledgement? It depends on what you're doing. So when I've been in my talks, again, with my mentors on how we do this, land acknowledgements should absolutely be very personal. You want to think about what activity you're doing on that land. You do want to acknowledge those traditional and current stewards. So that's definitely what you want to get in there. Is it's not just the traditional people, because if you leave out the fact that these people are still actively stewarding this land, indigenous land stewardship is a whole thing that we're trying to figure out. I was actually just in a whole class based on this concept. But that they're still out here stewarding, and you just want to acknowledge that, and then acknowledge who's in the area. So, there's a lot of different tribal groups in the area. So you find the best you can. If there's more than one that you should be mentioning, maybe you're on a trip that's going to be traveling in multiple areas. Being able to acknowledge everyone can be helpful. So it's really, really personal to you. And that's the big thing that everyone has told me, is it really should mean something. And again, making sure that you're really acknowledging the current people as they are on the land that they've continued stewarding, and don't make it sound like they stewarded the land in order for you to show up and play on it, because that's also inadequate. There's a way to say it where it's like, oh, thanks for taking care of the land so that I can now come here and have fun. Not really the point of a land acknowledgement. Then, okay. Anyone else? Was there anything online? Good. Good. Okay, thank you, Paul.
All right, I think that's about it. Last but not least, I'm going to reintroduce Charla Hughes, our executive director, to wrap things up.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you everyone who's still here at the end of the day, in person and online. Thank you to all of our speakers, all of our attendees who've been here today. I can't wait to see these videos online very soon. Thank you to Paul and to Tim for being our MCs today, and for all of their work getting us ready for the symposium today. As I'm going through some of these thank yous too, we also have a QR code that you'll see coming up on your screen here in the room and on Zoom if you'd like to do the survey online. And if you'd like to do the survey in paper, we have a few paper copies coming around here from Alex and Barbara. So we really appreciate your feedback. That helps us to improve our symposium year to year, now in our 5th year, so already looking forward to our 6th annual Prince William Sound Natural History Symposium in 2024. That wouldn't be possible without all of the work and support of so many people and so many organizations. Paul and Tim were here today as our MCs, but they've also been doing lots of planning since around this time last year to get ready for today. And with them, we have a really wonderful Natural History Symposium Planning Committee. And the members of that committee are here in this room: Alex von Wickman, William, who's been running our tech over here, Maya, Kelly Bender. Thank you all so much for everything you've done to get us to this point today. So many other people have helped in making this possible. All of our volunteers, Barbara Lyda and Ellen Ray running our chat online. Thank you. Before Ellen, Tori Vandersomen and Jonathan Brandt. All of our Prince William Sound Stewardship Foundation board members who have done so much to get us ready for this day and for all of our volunteer projects and everything that the foundation is involved in. Thank you to our Natural History Symposium sponsors, the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council, Chugach Alaska Corporation, and the Prince William Sound Regional Citizens Advisory Council, especially for all of Maya's time in helping us prepare for today and outreach for the event. Thank you to our Prince William Sound Stewardship Foundation Chugach tier sponsors, Discovery Voyages, Colony Builders, Drifters Fish, Glacier Jet Ski Adventures, Lazy Otter Charters, Stan Stevens Glacier and Wildlife Cruises, William Milton Media Pro, Clara Maish Visual Artist, Midnight Sun Brewing Company, and Rio Tinto. If you'd like to find out more about sponsorship opportunities, please visit princewilliamsound.org, or come see me or one of our Prince William Sound Stewardship Foundation board members if you give a wave here in the room. I know some of you are online too. Thank you. Also on princewilliamsound.org, we'll have our recordings from today's sessions up here in a few weeks, along with all of the resources that many of these speakers have mentioned, and contact information as well. So at this point, thank you, everybody. Have an amazing summer, and let's all help keep Prince William Sound healthy, clean, and wild for all to enjoy. Thank you.